Hi there everyone. Over the next few weeks, I will be experimenting with different types of short-form videos that will hopefully allow me to post regularly updated content that will not take significant time away from Screen Jumper. Up first is what will tentatively be called Triple Scoop, an informal, spoiler-free weekly roundup of movies I've watched, music I've listened to, and games I've played, and my brief thoughts on them. Given the experimental nature of this video, I do highly value your feedback and thoughts on content of this type. Without further ado, here is Triple Scoop. I'll start with this week's movie. Although I've seen several fairly good movies for the first time this week, including both volumes of Kill Bill and Silence of the Lambs, I'd like to talk about Zootopia. I went into this movie blind on the recommendation of a friend. I only knew it was an animated buddy cop movie by Disney, and that it was doing fairly well critically and commercially. I must say I was pleasantly surprised by it. I've generally not been impressed by Disney's animated movies that have come out in the past 2 years. Wreck-It Ralph and Tangled were pretty good, but I didn't care much for Frozen. Cars 2 and Planes felt like cash-ins, and Mars Needs Moms and Meet the Robinsons were, just awful. I feel like Zootopia is a success in many ways. On a technical level, the animation quality and visual design of the movie is absolutely fantastic. From what I've read about the film after the fact, the directors wanted to design the city of Zootopia as if the animals designed it themselves. So not only does it feel lived in, but doorways, parking spots, and even entire portions of the city, like Little Rodentia, have been created with the accessibility of animals of every size taken into account. Not surprising, considering the directors consulted with specialists on the Americans with Disabilities Act. I really like the designs of all the characters in Zootopia. They immediately invoke not only the personality of the individual character, but the biological characteristics of that character's species. I expect nothing less from Disney, as they have more or less set the bar in this area of animation. The characters themselves were pretty interesting. They each have their own motivations, such as Judy wanting to be the best cop there is, and Nick wanting to make a quick hustle. What's really cool to see is that they each have a multitude of different reasons for wanting to do what they do. Some of them more true than others, and those reasons are tested throughout the movie. Very cool. Zootopia also manages to drop a lot of conventions that have plagued Disney movies for generations. Romance is not the focus of the plot, or even any subplot, thankfully. Judy's not trying to be a princess, and certainly needs no Prince Charming to rescue her. On the other side of the coin, Nick learns to drop his aloofness and be emotionally vulnerable at one point of the story. And in a genuine way, not an, oh my feels are leaking everywhere, sob sob kind of way. There's no prophecy BS or kindly fairy godmother to grant a bunch of gifts to aid the heroes. Judy and Nick earn every bit of progress they make. I was a bit surprised at the directness the movie takes with tackling the theme of prejudice. This was dealt with in some capacity with Wreck-It Ralph, but it seems to be a systemic problem in the Zootopia world, not pasted on as it was in Wreck-It Ralph. It's sad to think that perhaps today's kids are much more aware of prejudice at an earlier age than they were a generation ago, but at the same time, it's encouraging to see this kind of topic addressed early on in the xenophobic, politically charged world we live. I don't wish to imply that this movie is just aimed at kids. This is certainly not a movie made to occupy kids for 90 minutes. I was never bored during the movie. In fact, I took great pleasure in a particularly well-made homage to The Godfather, which includes an accurate recreation, albeit in animated form, of Don Corleone's house and office. There's also a pretty funny tribute to Breaking Bad in one scene. I'm afraid Zootopia still holds on to a few Disney trends that I'm tired of, and feel it would have done better to dismiss entirely. There's the obligatory end credits scene, which features all the characters in a dance number set to a pop song, wrapped in 7 layers of feel-good. I'm really sick of that particular Disney trope. One of the movie's running themes is self-acceptance and living up to one's aspirations, which, while Zootopia actually fleshes this idea out a bit by wrestling with the concepts of a predestined in itself in opposition to the self one aspires to be, the whole believe in yourself message seems to be a very safe space for Disney films to comfortably settle in, and I'd like to see more Disney films take risks outside of that territory. There's also a twist at the end featuring a certain someone having their true intentions shown, and that certain someone turns out to be a villain. I feel Wreck-It Ralph handled this twist a lot better by giving more time and better motivations to its villain. and I feel Zootopia would have benefited greatly from more care in this area. Regardless, I saw Zootopia 2 days in a row, and I'm always glad to see a movie that I'd like to see once more. Next up, the album of the week. I've been listening to a lot of Impending Doom lately, so I'll recommend their album, Baptized in Filth. Impending Doom is an American Christian death metal band out of California, not to be confused with Impending Doom, the German satanic death metal band. Yeah, they describe their sound as goreship, worship of God through gore-sounding music. If you're scratching your head at this point, it might be because you assume that all Christian music sounds the same and is generally awful. I'll agree with you that Christian music is generally awful, but as Impending Doom seems to prove, music made by Christians or about Christian themes or ideas does not necessitate a certain sound. If you still don't believe me, check out One Girl Army by Five Iron Frenzy, a song celebrating women from a Christian perspective by none other than a third-wave ska band. Impending Doom has taken up the motto, "We hope to scare the hell out of you," quite literally, taking up an extremely thick, heavy sound. They go to some pretty great lengths to achieve this by doing things such as using 8-string guitars drop-tuned to G-flat, which is just ludicrously low. Their lead vocalist, Brooke Reeves, sounds like a pissed-off zombie from Half-Life 2. It's really quite something to behold if you're not familiar with the sound. Baptized in Filth is their 4th studio album. It deals with themes such as hypocritical Christians, the apocalypse, mindless indulgence, self-worship, and, strangely enough, even tolerance for honest non-believers on the track Falling Away. As much as I like Impending Doom's sound, particularly the strength of their breakdowns and lead vocals, I'm afraid they tend to fall into the trap a lot of metal bands fall into, in that this album lacks the peaks and valleys that I feel make an album particularly great. They tend to figuratively hit one note and sustain it throughout. However, the last 2 tracks are a welcome change of pace, particularly the standout track, My Light Unseen, featuring guest vocals by Ryan Clark of Demon Hunter, one of my favorite bands of all time. His comparative control and range bring some much-needed variety to the album, complemented by the band's shift to a ballad-like sound for the track. And it's on the strength of this song that I recommend this album over the band's follow-up, Death Will Reign, which, thankfully, contains a greater degree of variety in its song selection. Finally, my game of the week. I haven't had much time for leisure, as I've been capturing gameplay for the next Screen Jumper, but what time I did have I gave to the latest Hitman. Despite only offering one main story level at this time, the sheer size and complexity of the level has given me plenty to do, even 30 hours in. For those who have enjoyed Hitman Blood Money, this game is entirely that, to a much greater scale. It takes the variety of means with which to kill your targets and turns it into an entire game unto itself. What I want to focus on, however, is the game's art direction and level design. There was a particularly good interview with the game's art director that I'll link in the description. He contrasted this game's aesthetic with Absolution's, which took its look's inspiration from the exploitation films of the 70s. By contrast, this game's got a soft, photographic feel to everything, particularly the indoor sections. It takes its inspiration from many Stanley Kubrick films, including Barry Lyndon, The Shining, and Eyes Wide Shut. The lighting engine in this game is quite good, and supports the aesthetic quite well. In addition, the Paris level has been painstakingly designed to feel as lived in and alive as possible. Every NPC is there for a reason, and has something to do. They will change their vocal responses to you based on what disguise you are wearing, and what area of the building you are in. Objects used for cover are always there for a reason, and make sense for what they are and where they are put. You can pick up a screwdriver to use as a weapon, but will only find it in the AV tech or maintenance areas. You'll only find knives in the kitchen, and so on and so forth. The developers have taken the idea of a living, breathing world to an extent that I've not seen in very many video games, and so I can understand why they are taking their time with releasing each map. The next level, set in Italy, will be out at the end of the month, and I look forward to it a great deal. Thanks for watching this episode of Triple Scoop. Again, please leave your feedback, as I'd love to find regular content that works for you. I'll see you next week.